This
Thank you.
conference will now be recorded.
All right, let me hand it over to Stine from Visit Greenland.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I was so sorry I wasn't able to make the conference last month. I had really been looking forward to that too. Um, but this is the plan B, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends of tourism with Greenland, obviously as the case, and what we have been doing and been forced to do during COVID-19. So I'll just share my screen, and hopefully all the technique works. Here you go.
Yes, towards more tourism. What's not to like?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I'm just going to start out with this headline. Um, Janus got a little bit scared because I didn't use the headline for this this call, and I'm sorry. But the reason I'm using this is because we launched a completely new tourism strategy in February, and it was all based around four must-wins that were focused on sustainable tourism. Like we wanted to increase demand from adventure tourists. They are a segment that spends around 60% of their spending on a trip locally, in contrast to about 20% for other segments in tourism. We wanted season expansion, we wanted knowledge sharing and competence development, and we wanted to support this healthy framework for tourism growth in terms of laws, for example. And it was all put up with the UN sustainability goals, and everything was going really great, and we were super proud of it. And in March, COVID-19 hit, and we were like, okay, well, we can throw that away. Um, and we sort of and before I paddle into what exactly we did, I just want to let you know a little bit about the global impact that COVID-19 to date has actually had on tourism, because it speaks a little bit louder to say what kind of challenges we were facing. Internationally, we have had a fall in international arrivals on 73%. Domestic arrivals a little bit less because of all these staycation campaigns. And there, we have lost a really, really big amount of tourism jobs globally. And of course, that also shows in Greenland. And I think maybe the most important thing is to see that 62% of loss in travel and tourism GDP means that the business model and the whole framework for companies to survive this is just pulled away. And it is everybody in tourism who's affected by this, and it is all the secondary businesses in tourism who's affected by it as well. And unfortunately, we can say that all trends seems to look into that these travel bans and restrictions will last for the first half of 2021 as well. So that is sort of the reality we're looking at now within tourism, not just Greenland but all over the world. And everybody is talking about this vaccine. And as far as we know, it can sort of be a joker because it can really solve all the issues. But there is a lot about who will get the vaccine, how many will get it. And in terms of travel, will you expect that the locals should have a vaccine first? And should travelers also have a vaccine before you can actually travel? So there's a lot of sort of gray areas that doesn't make sense to say that vaccine is just this golden ticket to travel yet. In Greenland, as you can see, it's not much different. This is our number of guests arriving by plane. You can only arrive by plane or a cruise ship to Greenland. And the yellow are obviously our staycation tourists. It's a very small number, even for a normal year, because you're not allowed to do MICE tourism. MICE is, for example, conference, and you're not allowed to meet for business meetings across municipality borders in Greenland. So not only is it all of our travel industry, but it's also our conference and MICE industry that has been hit by this. So many of our big hotels. And for Greenland specifically, we got 456 cruise calls canceled in 2020. And nobody said at any point you have to cancel these cruise calls. Nobody made that decision. It was just not possible to go through with them. So we had a lot of frustrated companies, can you imagine, who didn't know if their products or their tours were able to be pulled through or not. And everything got canceled in the last minute. We had 3 months where you couldn't enter Greenland at all. Not even local inhabitants. If you were stuck in Denmark, for example, where many of us have family, you couldn't get into Greenland. And it also meant that many got stuck in Greenland. And it also meant that our national airline had to fire over 100 people. We were dealing with strict and constantly changing entry restrictions, and from the municipality side, nobody, or the healthcare side, nobody wanted to translate these to English. So travelers were pretty lost on whether or not their trips were able to go through. Like I said before, it was banned to have business meetings across municipal borders, and we still have that. That counts until the end of January. We weren't able to do any press trips, which is usually how we promote Greenland in the big media. So we get journalists to Greenland and they write a lot of good stories about us for Instagrammers, and we weren't able to do any of that. So our promotion was basically stopped internationally. Many local companies went into hibernation and found other jobs. Many of our employees who lost their jobs in tourism found jobs in other sectors. And we still have no clue what the full financial consequences of Greenland and COVID-19 is yet. And that is something that we're working on for how to restart tourism. So that is sort of the quick framework, and it all sounds very negative. So when COVID-19 hit, all the planes were shut down. We contacted a really good consulting company called Good Tourism with Natasha Martin, and she did a really, really good report from us. First of all, it was a scenario report. When can we expect to have tourists back? And the second is, what trends should we be working on when tourism actually hits again and we can start accepting travelers? And we actually started out beginning to have tourists in the end of July, August, and September before everything was shut down again and sharper restrictions were enforced in October. And right now, you can say that we can actually accept tourists. They are welcome, but they have to quarantine upon arrival, which means that nobody wants to spend their holiday quarantining for between 5 days and 14 days. So we don't see any travelers at all. So we are actually ending in this worst case scenario that we might even not be able to accept any tourists in January. And it might not be until a new high season in summer that we'll actually see an influx of tourists. We can hope they come back. And when it comes to trends about what will happen in tourism and what will drive tourism experience in the future, one of the biggest thing will be online experiences. And you might have all seen how theaters, for example, has made public recordings of their biggest shows, or how cities are now doing virtual tours on Facebook, or how some companies or visit organizations have been doing online marketplaces where you can buy local goods. And those are some of the experiences that people have been joining into because, like Janus and I were talking about, we all crave to travel. We all want to go out and have new experiences. And while the world looks the way it does, online experiences is the way to go, and to go safely. And they are consistent and they're there, and many of them are free. So that is a big part of where tourism is going. Of course, people still want to have real tourism experiences, but online experience is a good substitute, and it can be a really important marketing tool in the future because people are suddenly more used to experiencing destinations online. So here, virtual reality can be a big force in the future. Biosafety is obviously another trend that everybody is very, very careful about. If you want tourists in the future, you need to show them that it's safe. And again, that means that you have to redo how you do tours and how you market yourself, because there is this change in demand. So your whole sort of identity can, you have to adjust it into making sure that people feel safe going on tours with you. And social distance will be a really, really big trend in the future for tourists, which is, you can imagine that it's great for Greenland. We are the biggest island in the world that is not a continent, but we have one of the world's smallest population ratios. So we have a lot of space per person, and it gives us some unique opportunities to create small group tours. We already have a tourism industry that is fitted to groups of 12 people. Now, that might seem like a lot in a COVID-19 time, but in the travel industry time, that is very, very small groups. Normally, you would say that a group tour will be between 20 and 40 people. So you can say that when we are going into smaller groups, 12 people will actually be very small and very attractive in the future. And we can even go into what we call FIT, which are 1, 2, 3 person, these individually fitted travels. And that will be bigger in the future. That is our hopes, first of all, because that is something that we are really, really strong at. And again, it is something that you have to think about in your entire brand and marketing. And the story that you tell, that you can be alone, you can have all this amazing nature on your own, and you can experience it safely. More domestic travel is a trend that I think everybody has noticed by now, because that is what people can experience. You can also see many, many visit organizations got extra funding to do staycation campaigns to save the summer season in many, many countries. And it went well. And we did it too, and I will show that a little bit later. But domestic travel has now been sort of something that is incorporated in people's minds in a different way, that you can have good experiences locally. And if it's not domestically, then at least in the near markets. Because of biosafety, people don't want to travel far. Maybe they want to travel places where they can drive, or have to stay away from planes or trains, for example. So we will expect to see more travel between near markets, which also again means a completely different segmentation in how we market, but also more domestic travel in the future. Another thing that we in Greenland are not that fond of is that prices will most likely go up. And it looks like that because we have had this year or years to come maybe, where the travel industry has taken a lot of hits and their finances have taken a lot of hits. Plus there will be all these companies who has closed. So there is just a smaller selection of companies to choose from, and we're expecting that the demand will be the same in maybe 2-3 years. So it will be a natural price increase. And as a very expensive destination already, we are a little bit scared of that. And value change a lot during this pandemic. As you can imagine, before it was about having that fantastic Instagram photo. It was about going as far away as possible, about being as exotic as you possibly can, to stand out. Now values are more focused on safe travel, on getting into nature, about social distance, like I said before, but also about a deeper immersion into the experiences that you are actually paying for. So it is mainly about, before it was a very commercial focus. We need to get as many experiences as possible. Now it is expected that people will travel less and therefore want more out of their travels. So we're expecting a deeper appreciation for travel and for experiences, as well as people who endanger their lives to actually guide you around. Distribution is another thing that we will look into, and that is, again, people don't want to be collected in one place. So there is a golden opportunity to spread this tourism from these tourism hubs, like let's say Venice, and out into the destinations surrounding them. So there would be maybe a more bigger benefit from tourism in some of the more unknown destinations, if you can manage to spread them around, which is something that is being sought after by tourists. And lastly, demographics. I can tell you that in Greenland, the average tourist is above 55 years old. We call them the gray gold because they're actually a really, really good segment. They spend a lot of money. They can travel for a long time. But now they are also in some of those. It's also one of the groups where people are in the risk groups for COVID-19. So we're expecting that the first people to travel are actually a lot younger. Maybe we're talking teenagers and young adults, maybe families, but we're expecting the youngsters to travel first. And since we are again a country that doesn't have a whole lot of young travelers, that can be a challenge. And we really need to change our marketing story and our online accessibility, because that segment has a completely different behavior, especially online. And that leads me into what we actually are looking into, what we did do, but also what we're going to do. We started out by doing a staycation campaign, kind of like everybody else. The only issue was that we didn't have extra funding to do it. So we had to whip up this campaign all in-house with new websites in Greenlandic and Danish. We also did a campaign video. We did sponsored posts. We did a whole social media campaign, and we got Air Greenland and a travel agency to sponsor some gifts for a competition, and we all got that up and running in about 5 weeks, all in-house. Which we are quite proud of, and it worked really well. And one of the things that we say that it worked well, because you can't book through our website, so how can you say it actually worked? But one of the things that we can see is that before COVID-19, we had no package tours, that generally not in all of Greenland, not domestically, not internationally, and we ended up having over 60, which means that the accessibility to booking a trip in Greenland is increased by 100% or more. And that is something that can be rolled into an international market when the whole world opens again. So that is a big plus and has really boosted our destination development and accessibility in the future. We did a lot of industry webinars. Again, we had a industry that was completely falling apart and didn't know what to do. So we tried to get all these experts in to do webinars. For example, Natasha, who did the report for us on trends, and trying to just hear what was going on in the industry so we could tell that to the lawmakers and the healthcare system and the government, so we can try to save these companies in some ways. Which is also why it was really important that we entered a partnership with the Greenlandic Corona staff, which is all about how to, what restrictions are being made and what you're allowed to do when they access every single dispensation to enter Greenland, for example. But it also meant that we took on a big role about communicating all the restrictions, and especially to travelers. We ended up during our own vacations to have this Corona hotline, and we all had to sort of answer all these frustrated tourists' questions about whether or not they were able to enter or if the restrictions would change. And we got these restrictions through the media, so we had very short time to actually get this up and running. But in the end, we got a really good partnership that's continuing now. We help set up financial aid packages for companies, and we also helped getting a COVID-19 discount for staycation trips. So you can actually have a lot cheaper trips. So it's easier for locals to afford traveling in Greenland. Again, it's very expensive. And we have a thing in Greenland where companies can pay for travels. It's sort of a good for to keep your your employees longer is that the company pays for a trip to, for example, Denmark, so people can visit their families. But here it was converted so you could actually use that paid trip domestically, which you couldn't before, and that is a new good thing as well. We made tour guidelines. How can you go through with a tour during COVID-19? What do you have to think about? We made this big digitalization of our tourism restart activities. So we're actually able to have workshops that we would usually do physically online with, for example, all our local destination companies. We are engaging in all these travel fairs that we would usually travel to, where we sell Greenland to B2B, to travel agents. We're doing all of that online now, and it means that we can do a lot more because we don't actually waste our time travel. But it's not as beneficial because this meeting network one-on-one online isn't as intensive as actually meeting people in person. And then we are doing a lot of content adjustments, website adjustments, and so forth, like going into ASMR, where we're doing a new series about that. So you can look forward to getting that if you follow us anywhere.
And ASMR is?
It is this online trend where you can hear videos of people making subtle noises, like they tap different things, and it helps people fall asleep. So we are doing a Greenlandic version of that, or just hearing languages that people don't know. For example, there is a story podcast in Greenlandic that international people are starting to listen to because it's calming, even though you don't understand what people are saying. So it's stuff like that we are looking into, so we can sort of do content that is more than just marketing and just seeing, oh, look how pretty Greenland is. But we're telling the story in a different way, and a more usable way in some ways in the behavior that there is online now.
All right. So we have a little bit of activity on the chat also, Stine. I know
I'm
it's tricky.
almost done. I have a trend slide more, but that's all.
You'll do it. Yes, let's do it.
So if it's okay
We
to
have
have the
5 more
questions
minutes. It's
in
all
the
good.
end. Okay, good. I'll speed up then.
No, it's all good.
So very shortly, what is up for the future in travel, and especially maybe for those who crave to travel? All trends say that people want to travel. We all know that people do. When the minute that vaccine news hit, our traffic on our websites increased tremendously. So we're looking at the world opening up, and that people will travel, and that's very positive. And we can also see that we have 354 cruise calls planned for 2021, even though that cruises had these horrible corona ship stories. And that also means that the whole industry is working together in a cruise restart, which is also a completely new thing. So we can actually hopefully have a cruise season that can go through in a safe way. Online travel slows, like I said before, we have a very big increased interest in Greenland, especially from the United States, even though we are a little bit worried about letting American tourists in. But if they have a vaccine, hey, then maybe it's okay. We are expecting that there will be a recovery to the 2019 levels of tourism, and it will probably be in 3 to 4 years, depending on destination. We are finishing up on an analysis on the full picture of the COVID-19 impact, but also on the locals' opinion towards tourism, because you can't really have immersive and good adventure tourism if the locals are afraid of tourists. If they are not welcome, if tourists are not welcome, and that fear in the population is something that we need to figure out if it's there, and if it is, then what are we going to do about it so we can have tourism? Because you can't do it if the population is not on board with tourism coming to your country. We are also looking at how sustainable tourism is really being boosted in many angles in Greenland. Many has been taking this shutdown as a way of, for example, updating their hotels. We have no customers. Now we have an opportunity to rebuild or renovate into more sustainable possibilities. And we are seeing this big amount of product innovation. For example, a trail run trips. So you are basically spending 8 days trail running in Greenland. That is a completely new product, but again, it lives up to this whole social distance and all of these other immersive travels. So what we see for the companies who are succeeding here is really product innovation and safety storytelling will be the key to attract customers in the future. If you
All right,
want
Stine.
to connect at any time, here's my.
Very good. Let's just do a few minutes of Q&A. There's some, I think, quick questions from Guy Purcell on the chat. We could start with how much of Greenland's economy is based on tourism.
I'm not that happy about that question because we don't know exactly yet. It's about 414 million
Okay.
in total, so it's not that much compared to, for example, the fishing industry. But it's some unsafe numbers, and we think it seems low compared
All
to
right.
what it ought to be. So, yeah.
So, but you saw from the graph, your slide 2 or 3, how the curve has gone in the last 10 years or so, right?
We have had a general increase in tourism, not big numbers, but over time, stable numbers, which is of course really positive. We don't have a whole lot of tourists in Greenland. We have about a little over 100,000 a year, which is not very much, but we're also, again, a very small destination. Our biggest city only has 18,000 inhabitants, so we don't have a whole lot of capacity to have a large number of tourists. But we still want more, and we still have capacity to have a lot more visitors.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions, reflections? Teresa, are you there? The seasoned world traveler among us.
I am. I'm here. Hello. Hello.
Do you miss
Welcome to
traveling?
No, I was just interested in really just having a look and I mean I wish I was in Greenland right now, and I've wanted to go to Greenland for a long time.
You should be so welcome.
I've been to many far reaches of the Nordics, way up in Lapland and Tromsø and some of the northern Norway and places. But I think it's right. So I was wondering if you were going to do anything about virtual travel, because there's been so much this year that I've looked at travel organizations doing these virtual tours, trying to get people enthused to book maybe something a year from now. I think that's probably a big use of digital in this scenario. So that's really good to think about, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good input. Yeah.
But I think you mentioned also, Stine, something about online experiences being key and experimentation, perhaps with virtual reality.
Yeah, especially within marketing in the future, like you said, to get bookings, because people are now so used to being online and experiencing online that it can be a good tool to make people choose your destination. But it is still something that, of course, we as a visit organization can start doing it, but we also need to get some of the companies on board to provide tours. So it's something that you can book. We don't want to show off things that people can't book, for example. So it's all about getting out and being on site, and it's a bit longer process, as you probably all know, but it is something that's in our pipeline.
All right. We're perfect on time, Stine. Please do share your slides, and I'll make a summary and share it. And like you also said, Stine, feel free to connect. I can recommend following Stine on Instagram if you want to see some photos from Greenland here and there. I'm sure Stine will share, give or take, around April when the sun comes back to Greenland. Hopefully, Corona leaves us way before then. But for now, let's just give Stine a big round of applause. Thank you, Stine.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stine. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining.